Hello, this is Timothy Duke, and this is the video ebook that I have written and available at lulu.com. That's LULU.com, and just search for my name, Timothy Duke. And it's titled No Rapture, Pre-Tribulation, or Mid-Tribulation, or Post-Tribulation. The series that I've done so far, I've done the introduction in chapter 1, and this is chapter 2, which is entitled, Is the Term Rapture in the Bible? Now with this, we will discuss one of the things that is very common that people talk about the rapture, and other people question whether it's in the scripture itself, which is a good question, because if you're looking at an English language Bible, you will not find the word rapture. So let's explore why we talk about rapture. So a very common second question is the term rapture in the Bible. The first edition Bible, the Old Testament or Tanakh, was written in Hebrew, or the abbreviated Hebrew language of common people called Aramaic. The second edition Bible was a translation of the Hebrew Aramaic scrolls and scripts to Greek in 270 BC, called the Septuagint, or sometimes abbreviated in the Roman numerals LXX, meaning 70, because 70 scholars did the translation. And the third edition Bible was in Latin, and this is corresponding to the Romans conquering the known world and choosing Latin as the world language, just as the Greeks chose the Greek language in previous years. Now, the Latin version of the Bible was done around 300 AD and is called the Vulgate. And the fourth was in the Western Germanic language. Now, English was not a language until 200 to 400 years after the Latin version, the Vulgate, was printed, and which is more than 4,000 years after the Hebrew language was first spoken to Adam by God. The first book ever printed is the Gutenberg Bible in Latin in 1455 AD. The Hebrew, Greek, and Latin Bibles were used to create the Old Testament in King James Version in 1611 AD. So our Bibles in the English, are roughly 600 years old compared to the time of Jesus, which was over 2,000 or 2,000 years ago. Now, the New Testament was created from letters written in Greek by Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, and others to become books of the New Testament in the King James Version. Coincidentally, with English becoming a language, Islam became a religion and a government framework in 610 AD when Muhammad wrote the Quran. If you'd like to see the history of the English Bible in graphical form, Chuck Missler has done a superb job of showing how we got to the English language Bible and a couple versions, and also what happened to the Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. So if you top left-hand corner of the graph is the Hebrew, and the first Bible was prior to the Greek was the Vorlage. And then sometime in 200 AD, the Jewish people decided to make a new Bible, which was somewhat edited, but anyway, it was the Jamaica conference that was held, and the Jewish Bible was based off of that. And then later on became the Masoretic text in roughly 500 AD. Now, if we follow the Greek is just shown as the LXX, or the Septuagint. And the Latin Bible came about with the Old Latin, or the Vulgate. And as you can, in the graph, it shows that the Vulgate really was derived and translated from the Greek Septuagint, and the original, which was based on the original Hebrew Volage. The Vulgate also came from the Transritis, and also from the Gemina Jewish Hebrew Bible to form the Vulgate. And then when we look at English, roughly 500-600 AD, the Tyndale was the first one that published a lot of the Bible. King James Version, of course, in 1611. And then after that, we see the other versions of the Bible being translated and printed. And these typically came from a combination of, like the King James Version, came to a combination of the Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, whereas the NIV version, principally came from the Greek. Now, Latin was the language of the Romans, or the modern Italians, and the Romans had conquered all the known world after the Greeks were defeated by the Romans in 146 BC. The Greeks had dictated Greek to be the official language of the world and remained the dominant language in the Middle East, including Israel, until 100 AD. Most scholars believe the New Testament books were written in Greek, while some scholars believe they were written in Hebrew originally and then translated to Greek for distribution, since the Greek were demanding that all multinational publications be in Greek. Of course, the Romans were the ruling dynasty when Jesus was alive and dictated that Latin replace Greek as the major language of the world. Later in 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the city of Jerusalem and dispersed all the Jewish people in Israel to other countries in the world. The Romans were spiteful of the rebellious Jewish people, and after the Jews were dispelled from Israel, the Romans renamed Israel to Palestine. Of course, the obvious intent of the Romans was to wipe the Jewish people from the history books. They assumed by dispersing the Jewish people all over the world, the Hebrew language would die. They were successful. Hebrew was only spoken in Jewish synagogues, just like the Italian language caused Latin to die, and now Latin is only spoken in Roman Catholic churches, or just Catholic churches, and Vatican City in Italy. Hebrew is the only language to die out and then be resurrected centuries later in 1948 when Israel was reborn as a nation and declared Hebrew as the national language. The Romans translated the Old Testament from the Hebrew Bible called the Tanakh or Vulgate and the Greek translation called the Septuagint into the Latin Vulgate Bible. A Latin Bible was also translated from the Hebrew text generated by the Germanic Council in 400 AD and Greek text. The author Erasmus named it Textus Receptus, which included Greek text. The Vulgate and or Textus Receptus was used by the Catholic Church for all Masses, sermons, and prayers all around the world until the 1962 to 1965 reform called the Vatican II. Thereafter, Masses and sermons in Catholic churches and prayers were made and given in the local language. So as we look at the genealogy of the English language Bible, the first one was in 1382, which is called the Wycliffe Bible, and that was translated from the Vulgate. Then in 1525, Erasmus NT, he translated the English Bible, that Bible, from the Greek and the TR version. Tyndale derived his Bible from the first English New Testament. And in 1534, Luther did the translation from a German translation. 1535, Coverdale did the first complete Bible. Then in 1537, Matthew did it from Tyndale Notes. 1539, the Great Bible was done by some translators from Coverdale's revision. 1560, Geneva did it from Whittingham and others. And then 1568, the Bishop's Bible version was a revision of the Great Bible. And in 1609, Douay and Reims translated their Bible, their version, from the Vulgate. And then in 1611, the King James Version occurred, and that was translated from the Greek, the translated Greek, the Latin, and the Hebrew. I searched for the Latin Bible, Vulgate, in eSword for raptus and rapturo as the root Latin word for rapture. Latin uses different word endings to identify the grammatical use of the word. Just like in English, we add a D or ED to indicate the past tense or drop a Y and add ING or S for other grammatical uses. I found raptus in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 17. The Latin grammatical use is first person plural, future passive, so the spelling is raptamir, and translated to English, it is rapture. I used the Strong's Concordance number to distinguish the same word in different languages. Strong's uses an H to indicate the root word is Hebrew, and a G preceding the numbers, to indicate the root word is Greek. Hebrew is used for the Old Testament, and Greek is used for the New Testament in the Strong's Concordance. I could not find the Latin Vulgate with Strong's numbers, but interpreted the Latin with Google Translator. The Latin Vulgate from eSword for 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 17 is, I'm really going to butcher these words. My Latin is very poor. Diende nos qui vivimus qui relinquimur simir rapimur cum ilius in nubius abivium domini in area ex semper cum dominus eramus. While Google translates this verse as, then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. So we are able to see the Latin word rapamur, which we've already determined is the root, or is a part of the, or can be translated from the root word of rapture. Now, on the King James Plus version in eSword, which means the King James Version plus the Strong's Concordance numbers, is G726. In 1 Thessalonians 4:17, we go through the verse and get to caught up, and caught up is referenced as in Strong's Concordance as G726. The Greek with Strong's numbers, the Greek ABP Plus, if you download that particular version of the Bible from for an eSword Bible version, you would be able to read in Greek, or in this case, the plus indicates that it has Strong Concordance. So if your Greek is like mine, which is almost zero, the 1 Thessalonians 4:17, we can go to the Strong Concordance number of G726, which is this word, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Now, the English translation for that word in G726 in Strong's Concordance is harpazo, which means to seize, catch up, or snatch away. Strong's Concordance also provides the original word, or root, for that word as being that word, which is, I presume is, since they're saying the transliteration is harpazo, that must be how that would be pronounced. So it gives you the phonetic spelling and also the definition: to seize, catch up, and snatch away. And the usage is to seize, snatch, or obtain by robbery, meaning that the object that is caught up has no say in the matter, and it's somewhat like a kidnapping. The translation or transliteration of rapture evolved to English from Latin raptus or rapamur or rapturo, which was translated from the Greek harpazo. The word rapture means an involuntary abduction or seizing or catching up. A rapture is almost like kidnapping, except the person caught up is normally willing or voluntary, or waiting or praying for the event to occur. Some people may not be very willing to be raptured in any moment if they knew or suspected a loved one was not saved and being raptured too. Some, like the buried saints mentioned in Matthew 27, may not have known of the concept of rapture. Perhaps even Moses was not aware of a rapture or transfiguration that would occur thousands of years later for him and Elijah to have a meeting with Jesus. Although the book of Job indicates, which happens to be the oldest book in the Bible, indicates that Job was aware of rapture, which is the oldest book in the Bible. The Latin word raptus is also found in Revelation chapter 12, verse 5, which is the root Latin verb in Revelation 12:5 in Latin from the Vulgate is et perit filium masculum qui rectorus erit omnes gentes in verga feria et raptus es filius Ius et duum et ad thorium Ius. And unfortunately, Google translates this verse has, and gave birth to a male child who will rule all nations with an iron rod, was caught up to God and to his throne, which is essentially the King James Version translation. The King James Plus translation is caught up, as indicated by Strong 726, and probably refers to Jesus as being raptured. Some people think she is Israel and child are all believers, which results in a rapture of believers. Some believe it is not the child, but it is the church. In Revelation chapter 12, verse 5, with a strong concordance, and she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Acts uses the same Greek and Latin word, as indicated by the same Strong's G726 number, which is caught up, to Philip being raptured or caught up after baptizing the eunuch. In the Vulgate, in Acts 8, verse 39, cum autem ascendium dia qua spiritus domini raptit filium et ampus non vidit unitas ibat inum per viam suam guidance. In the King James Plus, we see we're looking for the raptuit that's in the Latin, R-A-P-U-I-T, and in Acts 8:39 in English. And when they were come up and out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord caught away Philip, which is G726, caught away. That the eunuch saw him no more, and he went on his way rejoicing. And I conclude that rapture is in the Bible as a synonym of caught up or caught away or took. Most English translations today use the term caught up or caught away or took instead of the more ancient words like harpazo or raptus or rapture or raptured or rapturo. And that finishes the second chapter of this ebook, and I will be uploading chapter 3 soon. God bless you all. Goodbye.